The morning sunlight seeped through the window, gently awakening her from her restless sleep. She slowly opened her eyes, feeling the cold of a winter morning in Hanoi. 15 years had passed since that day, but every morning she woke up Grapefruit, still couldn't help but feel a cold emptiness beside her. Grapefruit sat up and looked around the small room on the wall. The faded wedding photo was still hanging there as a reminder of the past. Short-lived happiness beside her are pictures of three filial children. The eldest son is 20 years old this year. The middle daughter is 18 years old, and the youngest is only 16. Smiling softly, I feel warm when I think of my children. Mom, are you awake yet? Mai rang from outside, pulling her out of her thoughts. Mom woke up, and her voice was still a bit hoarse. After her sleep, she stepped out of the room, and the fragrant aroma of coffee filled the small house. 00057. Mai was standing in the kitchen, holding a cup of coffee. The kettle opened its mouth and smiled brightly when it saw the mother and child making coffee for her. Mai said, "Give it to me," by taking the hot cup of coffee. Cup of coffee felt the warmth radiating from the hand. "Thank you," she smiled at her daughter. Mai looked at her mother with worried eyes. "Did you sleep well? I saw last night Mom was restless because of sighing." Softly, "Mom is fine. Just have sleepless nights tomorrow. Silently understand that there are pains that time still cannot erase." She hugged her mother, trying to give her some warmth and comfort. The noise from the next room signaled strongly. Woke up the boy, walked out. Eyes still closed, hair messy. Greeted Mom. Greeted sister, Strong mumbled. Still sleepy from smiling at the youngest son. "You woke up so early. Isn't today Sunday?" Why, Strong nodded yes. "But I promised my friends that I would go play soccer, so I'll eat breakfast, so Mom can get ready." Bowie said, putting down the cup of coffee and starting to prepare breakfast while Bowie was busy in the kitchen. Mai helped Mon straighten his hair and get ready. The family atmosphere was warm and peaceful, but there was still a void that could not be filled in the place of the father and husband who had left 15 years ago. Just then the phone rang. Of the Grapefruit pouring wine. She looked at the strange phone number that appeared on the screen with a little hesitation. Grapefruit picked up the phone. "Hello." Grapefruit's voice was a little shaky. "Hello, Grapefruit. This is Hung." The voice on the other end of the line made Grapefruit freeze for 15 years. That voice is still unchanged. Grapefruit, silent for a moment, trying to control the emotions that were rising. "Why did you call me?" Finally, she spoke coldly. "He wanted to see you and the children. He had returned to Hanoi," Hung said coldly. He sounded worried and apologetic. She felt her head spinning for the past 15 years. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times. But now that it was actually happening, she didn't know how to react. "Why did Boy?" ask, her voice trembling. "Why did he want to meet us now?" Hung was silent for a moment before answering. He knew he was wrong. He took too long to realize that he wanted to fix everything. "If you and the children give me a chance by closing my eyes, trying to hold back the tears that are about to fall." "I don't know, Hung. You've been gone for 50 years. Do you know what we've been through?" "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," Hung said. His voice sounded hurt, but he just asked for a chance to explain, to see the kids later. "If you and the kids, I don't want to see you anymore, I will respect that decision." Because looking at Mai and Mon, the two children were looking at her with curious eyes. She knew that this decision would not only affect her, but also all three of them. "Let me discuss it with you guys finally," Grapefruit said. "I will call you back after hanging up." Grapefruit stood there feeling like she had just gone through a storm of emotions, forever approaching Mom, worriedly asking Mom what's wrong. "Yes." Grapefruit. Looking at the two children, he sighed. Children. That was his father. He was still too young when Hung left. His eyes widened in surprise. Mai was a little older and still vaguely remembered her father. Silent, MT's face was difficult. "Guess Dad wants to see us," Grapefruit continued in soft voice. "But Mother wants to ask for opinion. You children, first thing tomorrow," frown face full of thoughts. "I don't know anymore, Mom. Dad has left us for too long." Then Strong, with the innocence of youth, again showed interest. "I want to meet Dad," he said. "I never really knew what kind of person Dad is," because nodded, understanding that each child will have feelings different about this. "What about your brother Hugh? We need to tell him," as if reading Mom's mind. The phone rang again. This time it was Hugh calling. "Hello, Mom." Hugh's voice rang up from on the other end of the line. "Mom, I just received a strange call. It was Dad." I sighed. "Mom, I know you." Oh, Dad, the kids just called Mom. Dad wants to see the whole family. Silence covered the other end of the line. After a while, Hugh went up. His voice was full of emotion, not knowing what to think anymore. Mom, all these years I've tried to forget Dad's existence. Grapefruit felt her heart tighten. Oh, 541. She knew that Hyo, as the eldest son, had suffered the most. When Hung left, Mom understood me. But maybe this is an opportunity for us to close the past, no matter what the outcome is. Hugh was silent for a moment and then said, I'll come back. Home right away, we need to talk about this after hanging up. Grapefruit turned to look at Mai and Mon. Your brother Hugh will be back here. We will decide together whether to see Dad or not while waiting for Hugh to come back. The atmosphere in the house became tense. Mai quietly cleaned the kitchen while Mon sat on the sofa, his eyes glued to his phone, but clearly not focused. Standing by the window, looking out at the familiar street, her mind was too busy. She remembered the day Hung left as if it was yesterday. There was no warning sign, no particularly big fight. Just one morning she woke up and found a piece of paper on the table. He was sorry he wasn't. Can't continue like this anymore, that's all. Hung left behind. No explanation, no contact, no promise to return. The first days after Hung left were a nightmare because, like a lost person, Sol tried to find out what happened, why her husband could leave like that. She called Hung's friends and relatives, but no one knew where he was. Some people said Hung had left. Foreigners say he has someone else, but no information is certain while having to face the reality that she is now a single mother with 3 young children. Hyo was only 5 at that time, Mai was 3 years old, and Mon had just turned 1. She had no time to be sad, no time to feel sorry for herself. She had to be strong for her children. The years that followed were a never-ending battle. During the Mai, Grapefruit works hard at a garment company to earn money to raise her children. At night, she studies extra to improve her qualifications. She hopes that one day she will have a better job. Every day is a challenge, but Grapefruit doesn't. Never let herself fall. She always reminded herself that her children needed her, that she had to be strong for them. The doorbell rang, pulling her back to reality. She hurriedly opened the door. Hugh stood there with a tense face and tired after the trip from the university dormitory. I said hello to my mother. Hugh said, hugging Grapefruit. Grapefruit hugged back, son, felt the anxiety in his tense body go home. Son, the children were waiting when the whole family had gathered in the living room. A heavy atmosphere enveloped Hugh sitting on the armchair, his hands clasped together, his eyes looking at the floor. Mai sat next to her mother on the sofa while Mon sat on the carpet, leaned back against the chair leg as he looked at each of his children and sighed. Kids, like I said, your dad wants to see us. I think we should decide together whether to see Dad or not. Hugh raised his head and his eyes lit up. Anger, why do we have to meet him? He left us for 15 years and now he suddenly wants to come back? Mai gently put her hand on her brother's shoulder. I understand how Hugh feels, but maybe we should. Listening to Dad explain, Mayan still sat on the floor looking up at the brothers and sisters. Never really knew Dad. She wanted a chance to understand him. Grapefruit, listening to her children, her heart ached when she realized each of them carrying different wounds and desires. She spoke softly, Mother knows this is a difficult decision, but perhaps this is an opportunity for us to face the past and find peace for your soul. Hugh looked at his mother with doubtful eyes. Did his mother really want to see his father? Grapefruit was silent for a moment, considering the answer. Mom, I don't know, Hugh. There were many mixed emotions, but I think if we don't meet, we'll always wonder what if. And sometimes that's more uncomfortable than facing the truth. Mai nodded in agreement. I think Mom is right. We should meet Dad at least to understand why he left again. Strong also quickly agreed. I agree with Sister Mai. Everyone turned to look at Hugh, waiting for his decision. Door 956. Hugh closed his eyes, took a deep breath. When he opened his eyes, he looked straight into his mother's eyes. I will meet him, not because of him, but because of my mother and siblings. Grapefruit smiled at her son, her heart filled with pride at his maturity. Thank you, Hugh. Mom knows this is not an easy decision for you. Was given by picking up the phone and calling Hung back. The meeting was arranged for the next afternoon at a coffee shop near the house. That night, no one in the family slept well. Everyone had their own thoughts and feelings about the upcoming meeting. Grapefruit lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. wondering if she was strong enough to face the man who had been everything to her. The man who had made her heartbroken and struggling for the past 15 years. She worries about her children, not knowing how this meeting will affect their psychology. Well, in the next room, Hugh is tormented by the memories of his father gradually appearing. He remembered the afternoons his father taught him to go cycling, the times he and his father repaired things around the house. But those beautiful memories were quickly replaced by the pain when his father left, leaving him with the heavy responsibility of having to taking care of her mother and siblings. Mai curled up on the bed, hugging her teddy bear tightly. She tried to remember her father's face, but could only picture a blurry figure. She wondered if her father would recognize her. Would he be proud of what she had achieved over the years? Not strong, even the most excited about the meeting couldn't sleep. He flipped through old photos on his phone. The photo his mother took before his father left him, tries to find similarities between himself and the man in the photo, wondering if he resembles his father. The next morning, the whole family wakes up in a tense mood. Breakfast takes place out in silence. Each person was immersed in their own thoughts as the clock struck 2 a.m. Grapefruit and 3 children together walked out of their house, walking to the coffee shop. Each step felt heavy. Ms. Chu was anxious and looking forward to the place where Grapefruit stopped in front of the shop, took a deep breath to calm down. "Are the children ready?" she asked, looking at each child. Dutifully nodded with a determined face. Mai held her mother's hand tightly, while Mon stood up straight, trying to appearing more mature than their real age. They entered the shop, and there, sitting in a far corner, was a middle-aged man with gray hair. When he saw them, he stood up with a face full of worry and regret. Grapefruit felt her heart beat faster when she recognized Hung. Even though 15 years had passed, she could still recognize the man she once loved deeply. But now her eyes only still staring into a deep sadness of greeting Grapefruit. Hung spoke with a trembling voice, greeting filial children, staring at Hung with cold eyes. Mai and Mon stood behind their mother, both curious and hesitant, taking a deep breath. "Try to keep calm." "Hello, Hung," she replied in a soft but firm voice. "We came here to listen to your explanation." Hung nodded, his face full of pain. "Thank you and the children for coming. I don't know where to start. Maybe he should start with the reason why he left." Her voice was so calm that it surprised even her. Hung bowed his head and promised that he knew that no excuse could erase what he had done. "But I want the kids and you to understand that it's not your fault or mine." He who couldn't hold back anymore and spoke up. "So whose fault is it?" "Yours. Do you know what we've been through?" Hung looked at Hugh. His son's eyes were filled with pain. He knew he didn't deserve forgiveness, but he hoped his son and siblings could listen to his explanation. He put his hand on Hugh's shoulder and tried to reassure him. "Our boys are listening, Hung," she said. Hung took a deep breath and began to tell how 15 years ago he fell into a serious mental crisis. Pressure from work, family responsibilities, and the feeling of not being capable enough. The pressure to take care of his wife and children weighed heavily on him. Instead of seeking help, he chose to run away. Hung stopped, trying to hold back his emotions. He thought that if he left, she and the children would have a better life. "More beautiful than you were wrong. Terrible mistake tomorrow," still standing behind Mom. Timidly spoke up. "Where did Dad go?" Hung looked at his daughter with painful eyes. "Dad has been everywhere, baby, from the south to the north, and even to foreign countries. Dad has trying to find myself, trying to become a person worthy of the family. But the more I go, Dad, the more I realize that I have made an unforgivable mistake." Strong with the curiosity of youth asking, "So why now?" Dad Hung turned back to look at his youngest son, whom he had barely had the chance to know. It took his father so long to realize that there was no place like home except where his family was. Dad spent years in therapy trying to come to terms with his problems, and he finally found the courage to return to apologize and hopefully make up for all the years he had lost. Lost by listening to the emotions mixed between pain and a little sympathy, she understood that life is not always black and white, that people can make terrible mistakes for complicated reasons. Hung because finally speaking, her voice was gentle but firm. "We appreciate that you have encouraged Dam to come back and explain. But you have to understand that 15 years is not a short time. We have been through a lot of difficulties, pain and joy too. We learned to live without heroes, not eyes, tears. You understand? I don't expect you and the kids to forgive me right away. I just hope to have the chance to make up for even a small part. Hugh is still angry to make up for it. Dad think Dad can make up for it. How do Dad know how hard Mom had to work to raising us, Dad? Do you know how quickly I had to grow up to help Mom? Hung looking at his son, the pain and regret were clearly visible on his face. He knew he couldn't erase the past, you, but Dad Hugh hoped can do something for the future. Dad wants to know about your lives, wants to support you if you let him. Mai is still shy, but also wants to understand more about the father she barely remembers. Dad, what have you been doing all these years? Hung smiled sadly at his daughter. Dad, you've done all sorts of jobs. Dad, you've been a construction worker, a restaurant waiter, and even a tour guide. But most importantly, Dad learned to face himself, learned to accept responsibility for his actions strong. The only one of the three brothers with no memory of their father curiously asked Dad, "Do you remember us?" Question man's simple but sincere words made Hung unable to hold back his tears. Dad misses his children every day. Man, there is no day that goes by that I don't think about you and wonder what you are doing. How have you grown? By observing the children's reactions, she saw that Hugh was still tough, but his eyes were less angry. He seemed to be trying to understand and somewhat sympathize with his father. The strong stork with the innocence of youth seemed to be opening up to the father you never knew, Hung, by saying we need time to digest all of this. This is not a decision that can be made in one day. Hung nodded with a hopeful expression. He understand, because he will wait no matter how long it takes. He just asked for a chance to know about the children's lives to get support if they need it. Hugh, despite still having many doubts, also recognizes the sincerity in our father's words need time to think about, he said. But maybe we can meet again tomorrow. And Mon nodded in agreement. By looking at Hung, her eyes were complicated, mixed with pain, sympathy, and a little bit of fragile hope. We will contact him, she said as they left the cafe. The whole family felt like they had just gone through an emotional storm. They walked home in silence, each one immersed in her own thoughts that evening. After the children had gone to their rooms, Grapefruit sat alone in the living room, looking out the window. She wondered if the decision to meet Hung was right. Whether this would bring happiness to the children will only hurt them more. Right then, Hugh entered the room. He sat down next to his mother, silent for a moment before speaking. Mom, I don't know how to feel anymore. Grapefruit turned to look at her son, smiling gently. Mom understands, son. This is not an easy situation to face. Hugh nodded. I am still angry with Dad, but after hearing Dad say that, I also feel confused. Maybe a little sympathetic because hugging your son is the right thing. Normally, Hugh, we can't control our emotions, but we can decide how to react to them. Hugh was silent for a moment, then asked what Mom thought we should do by sighing. Mom thought we should let Dad. I have a chance not to forget the past, but to see if we can build a better future. Hugh nodded thoughtfully. I will try for Mom and siblings, because Hug the Grapefruit family gradually opened up to Hung. Initially, just short meetings at the coffee shop, where they shared about current life. Hung listened with interest when Mai talked about her dream of becoming a doctor, when Mon shared about his passion for football. On to Hao, when he learned that Hugh was in his final year of university and had an offer from a company. As he grew older, the meetings became more frequent. Hung began to be invited to his family's home for dinner, trying his best to fit in, to make up for the lost years. One day when Hung was helping Grapefruit, cleared the table after dinner. He gently said, "Thank you, Grapefruit. Thank you for giving me this opportunity," because looking at him, his eyes softened a lot compared to the first day we met again. You do this for the children, say, but I have to admit that seeing you try so hard makes me feel better. Hung smiled with gratitude in his eyes. He knew he couldn't erase the past, but he promised to try his best to be worthy. Worthy of your trust and the children's, because nodding, let's take it slow, Hung. Everything takes time. Time passes, the relationship between Hung and his family gradually heals. He becomes an indispensable part. Indispensable in the Welala.